Hello Stratters, Nick here, known as the Exalted One on Magic the Gathering Online. Back at it again with some modern action. This week playing Esper Midrange, also known as Esper Sweet 2's, Esper Awesome 2's, Esper Cool 2's. The focus of the deck is really a lot of these interesting 2-drops that we have, and the way that's kind of built around them to synergize. So let's start here in the 2-drop slot. The first card we have is Dark Confidant. So Dark Confidant, one of the better ways to accrue card advantage in Modern, depending on what's going on in the Modern format. Sometimes there's a little bit too much removal, or cheap removal. Cards like Lightning Bolt and Fatal Push to make Dark Confidant very good. You have to untap with it in order to reap that card advantage. Additionally, you're paying life for cards, so sometimes the format is a little bit too aggressive, too many aggro decks, too much burn to make Dark Confidant work. But I think in this particular deck, it's going to work somewhat regardless of what's happening in the format because of how things are built. Next best 2-drop that we have, or at least the next best known 2-drop, Jace Vryn's Prodigy. So Jace is kind of similar to Dark Confidant in that you don't get your card advantage out of it right away. You have to untap with it, and you have to activate it a little bit in order to accrue your card advantage. So the looting helps you fix your draws, helps you find the relevant cards in the matchups that you're looking for. And then once it flips, you're able to rebuy the relevant spells out of your graveyard. So if you really need more discard or more removal, you can cast those spells out of your graveyard and get some card advantage that way. The last sweet 2-drop that we have here is Glorybound Initiate. So this is a 3/1 for 2, which is a little underpowered for Modern, but reading the rest of its text, you may exert Glorybound Initiate as it attacks. When you do, it gets +1/+3 and gains lifelink until end of turn. So it essentially attacks as a 4/4 lifelinker, and that I think is up to par with Modern. And this is the card that actually made me want to try out this deck. There was a deck out of Grand Prix Kobe's top 8 that played Glorybound Initiate. It was billed as an Esper control deck, although it was again kind of mid-rangey like this. And I thought, maybe there's something there, so I wanted to try to build my own shell around Glorybound Initiate. I couldn't, that deck looked like it was maybe built for a very specific sort of metagame in mind, and I wanted to build something, a little bit more general, or something that kind of optimized Glorybound Initiate in the shell or with the other cards that it's being played. Even among these 2-drops here, so getting in a lifelink hit for 4 damage builds you a nice life cushion for your Dark Confidant, for example. But it plays well with some of the other cards that we'll get to in just a moment here. So the rest of the deck is kind of like an Abzan mid-range shell as far as the black-white cards are concerned. So you have your discard, your removal suite of Path to Exile and Fatal Push, some of the best removal spells that you can play in the Modern format. Our 3-drop slot occupied by Lilianna the Veil and Lingering Souls, some of the better grindy card advantage cards that you can play in the format. Then here we have kind of an interesting one in Ojuatai's Command, which again plays really well with these 2-drops that we have. So you can return target creature card with converted mana cost 2 or less from the battlefield, or to the battlefield from the graveyard. You can gain 4 life if you want, you can draw a card if you want, and there's also a counter target creature spell. So very versatile and interesting card to have at the top of the curve here. So even if your Dark Confidant does get lightning bolted, or your Vryn's Prodigy gets fatal pushed, you can buy these cards back in the late game with an Ojuatai's Command. And doing it at instant speed makes it a little bit more likely that these cards are going to untap and not be removed before then. So lastly, the deck, just to kind of fill it out, plays a few Serum Visions. Whenever you're playing blue, it's good to have a little bit of card filtration so you can find the right cards for the right matchups. Additionally, you'll notice the deck is mostly at sorcery speed, or cards that you would consider casting at sorcery speed. Even these removal spells often you'll fire off on your main phase so you can push through damage, or so that certain creatures don't untap. And that plays really well with Jace Vyrn's Prodigy. That deck at the Grand Prix played Snapcaster Mage and a few more instants. I find that typically you want Snapcaster Mage with instants and Vyrn's Prodigy with your sorceries. So that's the main deck. Mana base, nothing too particularly interesting. You know, Darkslick Shores makes sense since all your turn 1 plays are blue and black. Kind of complement that. You get Shambling Vent. Also can help build some life cushions if you've won a little too far with a Dark Confidant. And then our kind of last flex spot is these Vault of the Archangels, which really help in attrition matchups. You know, some decks kind of struggle going through Lingering Souls, and if you have, you know, Lingering Souls with Lifelink and Death Touch, sometimes it can be a little bit insurmountable for certain decks. Turning our attention to the sideboard, and I like the way that this sideboard is configured. You have, you know, multiples of your Haymaker effects that you really want, so Stony Silence for Affinity, Nihil Spellbomb mostly for Dredge, Living End, those types of decks. You know, narrow, but cards that are very, very high impact in those matches. And then over here we have kind of a breadth of different flexible options. So we have a counter suite. You know, a lot of these cards are very similar. You know, Dispel and Countersqual do similar things. You know, against Eldrazi decks, Disdainful Stroke and Ceremonious Rejection do similar things, but there's enough flexibility here that we can bring these cards in for a wide variety of different matchups. Similarly, a lot of flexibility in Collective Brutality and Blessed Alliance. Lost Legacy is a nice card to bring in against combo decks that it'll KO. Engineered Explosives, a good versatile answer card for different problem permanents. Also particularly good at taking out tokens or 1-drops like Death Shadow. And then lastly here is our Disenchant type cards. I have one True Disenchant and one Fragmentize. The main reason for this split is just that sometimes Disenchant is a little bit cumbersome against cards like Spell Snare or Dispel that you don't get it to resolve. Fragmentize isn't affected by either of those cards, but at the same time, if you know a deck plays Chalice of the Void on one, a Fragmentize can't take care of that, but a Disenchant can. So that's kind of the reason for that particular split, and this is the deck. So Esper midrange, Esper sweet 2's, Esper awesome 2's, Esper cool 2's, whatever name you'd like to give it. This is the deck that I'll be playing this week for this video set. So thank you for watching this Deck Tech Stratters, and I will see you when we get to the matches. Stay tuned. Hello Stratters, Nick here playing a Esper midrange deck in Modern today. So with the new card, Glorybound Initiate. So the art looks to be missing off the card, but this is kind of the key piece from the new set that made me want to try this deck out. So we look to be on the draw, and we're going to keep this hand. A couple discard spells are always fine in the opening hand. Serum Visions to find what we want, so I think we'll lead on probably the Inquisition, just to see what the opponent's up to, and then cast the Serum Visions later. So then once we know what the opponent's up to, we can dig for the right cards with the Serum Visions. So Hallowed Fountain taking 2. And the opponent suspends Ancestral Vision, so this is very likely blue-white control. So let's Inquisition just to take a peek and find out for sure. Okay, so they have a Serum Visions and they have a Remand. What did they do with their Scry? Put a card on top. So they likely found a second land. So I'm going to take the Remand and leave them with the Serum Visions, since they likely scryed a land to the top of the deck. So it doesn't really do anything for us to take their Serum Visions and hope that they miss a bunch of land drops. They'll probably already have their second land drop rolled up from that scry off the mulligan. then they had Madcap Experiment, so presumably this is the Madcap Moon deck. Or, well, not the Madcap Moon deck, but a deck playing Madcap Experiment into... it's not Blightsteel Colossus, it's... Platinum Empyrean, that's the card. An 8/8 that your life total can't change. Okay, so they did have a second land. Kind of curious that they're not scrying. I probably would have fetched out the Steam Vents and then cast my Serum Visions just to not upset the scry, but to give myself plenty of mana. So we do not know. We know they have a Cryptic Command, and we know that they have a Madcap Experiment. So it's kind of not sure if we want to fire off these Inquisitions or not. Let's get a black-white land. I think I want to get a clock into play, since we're not sure that these Inquisitions are going to even do anything. You know, they could have just cast Serum Visions, drawn a land, in which case our Inquisitions miss. Rather just cast them when there's, you know, no better alternative. Alright. So I'm going to attack with the Glorybound Initiate and exert it, just to get a little bonus life. And I think I'm going to take a line where I cast this Serum Visions, and then if I don't hit a land, I can cast Inquisition, and if I do hit a land, I can play a Dark Confidant. And I would like another land, and I kind of like a Dark Confidant too. So I'll put them on top, but I'm going to put the land first, and then I'll fire off this Inquisition. See if we hit anything. So if they're fetching, maybe they have another Remand. Perhaps a main deck negate, you know, something like that. Logic Knot, the way that mana's going out of the pool looks like it could be a Logic Knot. But one of those spells. Warping Whale. That's a weird one, since they don't look to have any colorless mana. Although, you never know. It could be a deck that plays, you know, a few of the Pain lands and like a Desolate Lighthouse or a Ghost Quarter, and then casts the Warping Whale that way. It is unusual, though, that's for sure. Alright. So I know we have a Dark Confidant on top. But I think I want to start by Inquisitioning the opponent. Since they didn't play a land, and they have 2 4-drops in play. Another Warping Whale. Man, that's... I'm glad that they don't have access to the mana to cast them because, I mean, that gets Glorybound Initiate, Dark Confidant, all these cards. So I'm going to fetch away that other Dark Confidant because I want to play the one that I do have. So, all right, and past the opponent. It's just like if they were a blue-white control deck, because blue-white control can actually play a lot of colorless sources. They can play, you know, Tectonic Edges and Ghost Quarters, and very often they. Okay, so this is coming off suspend this turn. They can play Mystic Gate, and they could play a Darkar Waste. There's a lot of different cards that they can play, so in that deck I wouldn't necessarily be the most surprised to see a Warping Wail, but in what appears to be a 3-color version, you know, it's a little bit more unusual. And kind of the other reason to fetch and to play this Dark Confidant is if they go to play the Madcap Experiment right now, we don't have any answer to the Platinum Empyrean. So it'd be nice to fetch and give ourselves some chances. Alright, so is this going to take out our Glorybound Initiate, or is this going to start the uptick? Okay, so they start the uptick, which is probably going to force me to exert this Glorybound Initiate. Okay, so those were some pretty decent draws. I think what I want to do is to just get Nihiri off the table with my attacks. So, okay, so this is, have to be very careful about how you attack with these exert creatures. Okay, so both going at Nihiri to take it off the table. And then I think I want to fire off this Inquisition just to check for any spot removal or counter magic they might have. So Cryptic, Madcap, Polymorph, Spirebluff Canal. Okay. So since they don't have any removal, I am going to play this Jace Vyrn's Prodigy. And the main reason to do this is just to hopefully untap with it and get that loot effect out of it so I can just see one additional card. Oh, and so after seeing that Polymorph, I bet the Warping Wails are in here just as a nice flexible card that you can, you know, kill a creature, counter a sorcery, but you can also make this Scion and use that with the Polymorph. So that's pretty interesting, at least kind of clever. So what does the opponent have going on here? Are they going to fire off a Cryptic, tap my team? Doesn't seem the most useful, at least right now. Alright, so attack with the Dark Confidant. So I'll be curious to see what they do here. The Cryptic Command. Just tap and draw. Okay, so then this is gonna force me to use my Jace in response. And don't need another land. Go to second main phase. And so I have a path to exile. That'll be removal. I think as long as so it looks like it's a polymorph deck, so as long as I have Fatal Push-Up to kill whatever creature they're trying to polymorph off of, I think I'll be alright. So I'm going to just play this another Glorybound Initiate, play my land, and then just uptick the Jace. So I just wonder if they have more colorless sources to cast these Warping Wails with. Because it looks like they have, you know, a fetch shock land with some basics, mana base, but then they also have this Spire Bluff Canal, and I would have imagined the Spire Bluff Canal having been mass polymorph. One second. Exile all creatures you control, then reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal that many creature cards. Put all creature cards revealed this way onto the... So does this do anything if they don't have any creatures out? Like, this isn't all... It's all you control. So, that happened. Not exactly sure what that was meant to do. There's a Dark Confidant. Thank you, Bob. I'll happily take a Lingering Souls. And so I think I'm going to... Okay. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what was happening there, but I'll take it. So against this deck, we saw that Inquisition maybe looks somewhat weak, but for sure we want Countersqual, Disdainful Stroke. What else do we want? Collective Brutality might look... So it looked like they were kind of a top-heavy deck that maybe we don't want as many Inquisitions, but we also probably don't want all these Fatal Pushes, like a couple Fatal Pushes just to like get the Scion tokens so that they can't use their polymorphs is fine. And actually Ojutai's command might be pretty bad. It didn't look like they were using a lot of removal on our creatures, and we aren't really going to get much out of countering target creature spell, so cut those. And the thing is, there's multiple polymorph effects, so Lost Legacy doesn't necessarily seem like the best. And it looks like they have Platinum Empyrean as one hit with their polymorph, and since they have Nihiri, they probably have Emrakul as well. So it might be like one Platinum Empyrean, one Emrakul. So that leaves me maybe down a card. Could bring in Dispel just as a way to get their cryptic commands, and we saw they had Remand a couple other cards, so I'm going to go ahead and submit this. So I have to say that game, like, Glorybound Initiate didn't look embarrassing. I mean, when I was thinking about playing this card, it was, you know, it's a 3/1 for 2 in Modern. It doesn't seem great, but I mean, when you exert it, it's like a 4/4 for 2, and, you know, that's good enough for Modern. You know, 4/4 for 2 with lifelink. So when it's attacking, it's on the, you know, reasonable for the Modern curve, and when it's not attacking or not exerted, then, you know, it's not quite good enough. But I mean, that game, it looked pretty good. So Yeah, this I'll keep. So we're gonna need to find a little something with this Serum Visions. I'm also interested to see how many colorless sources our opponent is actually playing with. So let's get a blue-black land, and which do I want? I guess it doesn't really matter necessarily which fetch I use. Some decks it can really matter, like you want to use a certain fetch land over the other one, or the way that your mana is going to work out a certain game. Okay, so Inquisition, Dark Confidant, Jace. I mean, I kind of like all these cards, and I would somewhat like to get removal or some of those counter spells that I sideboarded in, but I think these will be good, and if the Confidant's resolved, then they get me a little bit farther in the deck anyhow. So I'll take those, and then I think I'm going to run out Dark Confidant, and then the following turn, probably Inquisition Dark Confidant, unless this Dark Confidant resolves and it doesn't get removed, in which case I might go with Lilianna the Veil just to start working on the opponent's hand. And like I have Lingering Souls I can easily discard. I have, probably at least one extra land. So Confidant is sticking. Draws me that Jace I knew about, and then we get another Lingering Souls. So attack in with the Confidant. And just fetch out a basic swamp. Plus this Lilianna, just discard a Lingering Souls. See what the opponent discards. Timely Reinforcements. Yeah, so they can get creatures off of Timely, but getting life off of Timely while we have Dark Confidant in play might be a bit challenging. Pop out these graveyards. So this could be Nahiri. They could be dropping their life low if they have another Timely. Okay, so Nahiri, curious to see if it just gets the Confidant or not. Okay, so just gets the Confidant. And I think I want to see what the opponent's got going on and then play one of these 2-drops probably. So definitely want to take this Anger of the Gods. Timely Reinforcements is going to be, well, as long as I keep taking a little bit of damage, it's not too bad. So I think I want to take the Timely with Inquisition and play my Jace. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. So that allows us to use all of our mana this turn. So take Timely, play Jace, and then just discard this other Lingering Souls. We'll get either a Madcap Experiment or Cryptic Command, probably Madcap Experiment, out of the opponent's hand. Alright, so we have the opponent in the resource depletion phase with Lilianna the Veil. I'm curious to see how the opponent uses their cryptic. So Nahiri's a really powerful planeswalker, but we're going to have Lilianna, and we're also going to have a Jace. So they activated and chose to not discard anything. So this looks like the cryptic command. Curious if it's going to bounce the Jace or the Lilianna, or exactly what they're going to do with it. Okay, so they decide to do nothing. So draw step, this feels like probably bouncing the Lilianna. Yep. Oh, and they tapped. Oh, I should have. I didn't. I assumed they were going to draw a card. Okay. So I think what I want to do is redeploy Lilianna and then play Lingering Souls. So I kind of punted a little bit on that cryptic. I just assumed they were going to draw a card instead of tap my team. I mean, had I noticed, that would have been way worse for them, since I can just activate my Jace and make it become a planeswalker. But since I didn't notice, that actually worked out really, really well for them. I think still in that situation they probably want to draw a card instead of tap my team. Also curious that they didn't Nahiri my Jace while it was tapped. Okay, so let's activate the Jace and discard this other Jace. Play a Dark Confidant. Plus this Lilianna the Veil, see what the opponent's got. Okay, so just a land. And then I can attack Nahiri. So I just want to keep this Nahiri in check. And I'm actually going to leave the Lingering Souls in my graveyard uncast. But I am going to cast a Serum Visions with this Jace. Put those on the bottom. And I'm going to... I think I'm going to keep this Polluted Delta in my hand in case I draw a card that I want to keep in my hand through next turn with the Lilianna discard. So at this point, if my opponent draws like another Anger of the Gods, that would be really good for them. They still have my Planeswalkers to contend with, but an Anger of the Gods would, leave them with a Nahiri, so it'd be kind of Nahiri versus Lilianna and Jace. It looks like Dark Confidant's going to live again. Okay, so Countersqual, and this is the kind of card I was talking about that I'd want to keep a land in hand. So, plus Jace, no targets. Everybody will attack Nahiri. And then I'm going to play this Glory-Bound Initiate and leave up Countersqual. First plus the Lilianna discarding my extra land. And then this Glorybound Initiate is going to give me the insurance I need against, dying to my own Dark Confidant. And it looks like everything's going pretty well here. So this is, I think, kind of also one of the synergies. So this Glorybound Initiate, when it could be a 4/4 lifelinker on the attack, providing you with that life total cushion for your Dark Confidant. That's a big draw to playing the two together. So if the opponent has some sort of Wrath effect, I think they get to keep kind of playing, and if they don't, I think it's going to be pretty difficult for them. I guess they know that I have the Countersqual since I revealed it off the Dark Confidant, so even from their perspective, they're probably really up against it unless they have a Supreme Verdict exactly. So what do they got here? Ooh, so they do have Anger of the Gods, but we are going to Countersqual that. Yeah, so this, I mean, here he is a difficult Planeswalker to deal with, but I think we just about got this one. So I am going to attack and exert this at Nihiri. All these will attack the player. So attack the player. Ultimate my Lilianna. I'm going to separate the Izzet mana versus the Azorius mana. This is one of those really nice feeling wins. Yeah. So my opponent really stuck in there for a while, and I mean, even up to that last turn, if we hadn't drawn specifically Countersqual, that Anger of the Gods would have really set us back a ways. But we had the Countersqual, and things ended up panning out well for us. So hopefully you enjoyed this match. I'll be back with another match, so stay tuned, Stratters.